On today's episode, I am in Alpharetta, Georgia, at the offices of Dearth Law. I'm here, right across from me in his conference room with Marc Dearth. And Marc, you've been practicing law for over 20 years now, is my understanding. And your primary focus is in tax and estate planning?
Yes.
Is that correct? And we're going to get more into the nuances of that. But one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you and bring you on Southern Character is that not only are you extremely brilliant when it comes to estate planning and tax law, you're also licensed in multiple states throughout the Southeast.
Correct.
Correct. So Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, and North Carolina.
You got it.
Right. And we were just, before we lit up the microphones, we were talking. So I just got back from Memorial Day. I was down in Cape San Blas, Florida, out on the water, did some fishing with the kids. You were just telling me a story that kind of struck me right to my heart because I love music. I played guitar in a cover band in college when I was at LSU. We can get into college in a minute. But so you just got back from Vegas.
Seeing Dead and Company at the Sphere.
Okay. So U2 was out there for a while. Like they were the resident act for a while. But so now, I mean, this is latest and greatest. Dead and Company's out there, you said for how many months now? 4?
I think it's a total of 4 they're going to be out there.
Okay. So, but this is your first time seeing them at that venue, right?
Correct.
At the Sphere. And what was your take on that?
Absolutely unbelievable experience from a visual event. It was hard to remember that you were at a concert sometimes because of the screens around you and everything going on.
That's really cool. So I'm probably not as much of a Deadhead as you, but I'm just going to ask you what's your favorite Dead album, or is there one, or they're just?
It's a great question. I mean, I think about it from the first Dead song I ever remember seeing was Touch of Grey, the music video on VH1 back in the 80s.
I remember that. And
the first Grateful Dead CD I ever purchased was Skeletons from the Closet, like the compendium CD. That was really like the gateway to everything else that I've ever listened to.
Yeah, no, Skeletons from the Closet. I'm trying to think of what's like the main title track on that. What were some of the songs on that?
I was actually just reviewing it with my son the other day. It's got Friend of the Devil, Truckin', Sugar Magnolia, Uncle John's Band, St. Stephen.
St. Stephen's. St. Stephen's is one of my favorite.
Absolutely.
No, man, that's so cool. So would you go back to Vegas to see the show again? Like, is it that good?
We are actually going back in August.
Oh, you are going
to
back.
See it again because I enjoyed the first time so much. We're going to take the kids this time and let both of my boys play piano, drums, and guitar. Awesome. And so letting them see it, and then probably my oldest and I may go the second show that weekend.
Yeah, so that's a great segue. Why don't we start there with family, right? I mean, I think that's a great place to start with you. So you have 2 boys, and I think a couple of dogs and a couple of cats. Is it like a menagerie?
It's a whole zoo of people. It's 2 dogs,
okay.
2 indoor cats, and 2 outdoor cats that live in my barn.
Okay, so you live around. So you live in Milton?
Yes.
Okay, so not too far away from your office. And so you said your boys play piano, drums. What instruments do they play?
And guitar.
And guitar.
And my oldest also plays bass.
Okay, so kind of like the Van Halen brothers, maybe to some extent. What is the best instrument if you had to say for each one? Are they proficient at all of them, or does like one really gravitate towards drums and one towards bass, or what do you think?
It's interesting. I mean, I think my youngest is probably a sneaky better piano player, but because he's 3 years younger, people don't appreciate how good he is. I would think my 16-year-old's the better musician generally just because of interest and attention and practice.
Okay.
But he's a phenomenal guitar player.
So they didn't go to the show with you on this trip, but they're going to the show.
Correct.
So they're into the Dead.
They're getting into the Dead. We're actually taking them to see Metallica in Chicago in August as a Christmas present from last year because they're never in Atlanta. Or they're not in Atlanta on this tour.
Oh, I got to tell you right off the bat, you sound like an amazing father. I mean, you're taking your kids to see the Dead and Metallica. I know it's not Jerry Garcia, but still.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So how do you guys go on? Well, before I leave music, do you or your wife play anything?
My wife grew up playing piano.
Okay.
I cannot even play a recorder from elementary school. I have zero musical talent.
So she plays with the boys? The
I think she helps them practice. I don't even know that she plays with them.
okay, so, but like in your house, do you have like a studio? Do they jam? Or do they just play individually, separately, and they kind of do their own?
We have the room that we always thought would be the library once it was no longer a playroom that is now the music room.
Okay. All right, and your boys are in high school, middle school, how old?
16 and 13. So going into 11th grade, going into 8th grade.
Gotcha. And so you went to... Are you from like the Milton area? Like, did you grow up around here, or like where did you grow up?
So originally from Ohio,
Wow.
but moved to East Cobb, Marietta when I was in middle school, 6th grade.
Okay, so East Cobb, 6th grade, and then you went to Georgia for undergrad. So and your wife's name is Jamie.
Yes.
Is that correct? So did you guys meet in high school? Did you guys meet in college, or somewhere later down the line?
So we met, I was a freshman in college. She was a junior in college. So when I went to Georgia, my parents left East Cobb and moved up to Lake Lanier.
Okay.
After my freshman year, they said, rather than going back and working at the Applebee's in Marietta, why don't you come get a job at this new restaurant in Gainesville, Georgia, called Rio Bravo. Many people will know.
Yes.
So I went and got a job there. The restaurant had been open maybe 2 months, and Jamie trained me as a waiter, or server.
So she was like a manager training you?
She was just the most senior server they had, training me as the new server in town.
Got it.
We started dating a year later when I was a sophomore, right before she graduated from college. She was a volleyball player at Brenau University in Gainesville. And then before I went to law school, she told me we were getting married and she wasn't moving with a boyfriend.
So you got married before law school?
Yes.
And where did you go to law school?
Stetson down in St. Pete, Florida.
Okay, that's right. No, I do remember seeing that. So you graduated from Georgia what year?
2001.
And then you went to St. Pete with a wife, right? And you did 3 years of law school in St. Pete?
Graduated in 2.5 years.
2.5. And so so that gets you to what, 2004-ish? So did you just kind of stay in Florida for a while and pass the bar there? Or like how did you get from St. Pete back to Milton?
Well, it's actually funny. I mean, we had moved down here. We talked about transferring back during my first year of law school, but I was on the track to graduate 2.5 years and was doing well. So with 3 months left in law school, Jamie took a job back with the restaurant, going into training and development with the restaurant. And I moved into the dorms, and everybody thought I was getting divorced because my wife and my dog disappear, and I've moved into the dorms as a third-year law student. So last final was over. I got in the car and drove back to Georgia and have been here ever since.
Wow.
And we're still married.
And you're still married. So this was then around 2005-ish?
Took the bar in 2005, started practicing shortly thereafter.
Okay. And so you're in Georgia, right? You're in this area. So where did you start? Where did you cut your teeth as a... I think about John Grisham, like The Firm, like Mitch McDermott or whatever his name was, Tom Cruise. So like you're the young buck, like I want to like set the world on fire.
So it was a boutique firm in Sandy Springs, Georgia. Okay. That a very interesting time to be practicing in the tax and estate world, where it was their client base was wealthy landowners in these small counties down in South Georgia that had tremendous wealth on paper with the boom in real estate, but didn't have much liquidity in the way of wealth. Wow. And so we did a lot of complex planning on the estate and gift tax side. You had exemptions that were, $1.5 million versus, what they are today of 13.61 million, and practiced there from 2005 until 2011.
And so 2011, because you started Dearth Law in 2015, or did you start in 2011?
So I had a separate partner that I started a firm with in 2015, left him in 2020 to have this just under my name.
Gotcha. So like what was your kind of like catalyst motivator to kind of leave the boutique firm and strike out on your own?
I think the joke might be that I'm ultimately unemployable.
You're ultimately unemployed. Okay.
It really is, the desire to do things in the way that I want to and build a firm in the image of what I think a law firm should be. It was always crazy to me in law school that the tower on the hill, the lawyers didn't return phone calls and all of those things, and grew up in the service industry and restaurants and wanted to be responsive and flexible and available to our clients when they needed them. And so, the first probably 7 years of practice where it's cutting your teeth and kind of learning what you're doing and learning how to practice was a necessary evil. But, as a junior partner, I bristled when I didn't agree with things. And even having a partner, it wasn't always a great fit for some of the things we were doing, where it's almost inevitable looking back on it that it was going to be a firm that was going to be built with my desires and operations.
Yeah, it's the parallel that you just made there, and it just because, so I grew up in Louisiana, and I think if you grew up in Louisiana at some point in your life, you work in the service industry, right? I remember summers at LSU, I played in a cover band, I answered phones at night, and I worked as a line cook, right, and at Sammy's Grill on Highland. And whether I was a cook or, if I was, had to step in and help 10 bar, or, hey, they needed help on the floor with tables, right? It's a different mindset, right? Working in that industry. And I say that because when you brought up that mindset and you want to do things how you felt they should be done, I just remembered some of the first times of interacting with you, because we've had a couple of, opportunities together. And I remember, when I was reaching, I would email you, and you would actually send an email back at 6:30 or 6:45 in the morning. I'm like, oh my God, who is this kindred spirit who sends because I would send you an email 5:45 because I'm up. And not that I would expect, my wife tells me I have boundary issues. Okay, let's just get those out of the way. But she's like, why are you emailing people at 5:45 in the morning? But I was like, look, they're not going to write me back, and I don't expect them to write me back. But I turned to Amanda at one point. I'm like, Marc, this attorney just wrote me back at 6:15 in the morning. What's that all about?
I probably have some boundary issues too, if we're being honest.
But no, that's interesting. So why tax and estate planning? What was your, what is it about? Because there are all these different areas of law that you can practice in. You talked about the South Georgia, the wealthy landowners. I think you brought up a really interesting point about the estate tax exclusion, which does sunset for, Grens at the end of 2025, right?
Correct.
But before we kind of go down that road, what was there something particular about succession planning, estate planning, or I don't know, you tell me.
I think it's a combination of things. I was the quintessential quiet kid growing up who sat in the back of class, got decent grades, and as long as I did well, nobody gave me a hard time and didn't get pushed. I would tell you my junior year at Georgia, I finally figured it out and became not that I was ever a bad student, but I went from a good student to a great student, a 4.0 student where I didn't get B's. And felt like I just had more education and more to give in that. And so law school became a natural extension of that. And then once you're there, well, I don't like controversy. I don't like disagreements. I was a business major, a math guy, kind of geared that way, which made tax the natural place. And then ultimately, that service industry experience, I think it was liking helping people. And so you stay away from litigation, service industry, helping people, that estate planning tax world the path illuminates itself in a lot of ways.
Okay. So yeah, as a tax attorney and focusing on tax and estate planning, it's, again, I don't know because I don't know, so I'm just going to ask the question, but how often do you see the inside of a courtroom?
Never.
Okay. And that was,
by design.
By design.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was wondering, if you did have to go to court a lot, it was like in Louisiana, where I grew up, everyone's you pull out the yellow pages, and the section for attorneys in Louisiana, it's the thickest part of the phone book. Was anyone else in your family, your mom or dad, an attorney or an uncle, or is this just something you kind of discovered and wanted to do?
No, there's nobody in my family that's a lawyer. My dad took a job out of Dayton, Ohio with Reynolds and Reynolds selling paper to car dealerships, is what brought us to Atlanta ultimately. But he is, I think I learned a lot of the service orientation from him. He is the ultimate giver. He will drop what he is doing to go help anybody with anything that they may need. Okay. And so just a, probably natural experience of learning that and picking it up from dad along the way.
Okay. Because I was wondering, is it when, I went through a divorce, remarried. My divorce attorney was great, but they called her like the bulldog. So I just didn't know if you had like a cool courtroom name, if people called you like Darth Vader, or anything like that. Like, oh, like here comes, like if you're walking and like, people are like, oh, here comes Marc Darth, or like if you have like a cool.
I mean, Darth Vader's been one that's stuck around since elementary school playing football.
Okay.
You get death, you get dirt.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of different plays on it you hear.
Okay. So, well, I don't know. When I was thinking about you and like doing this podcast, I was like, oh man, like Darth Vader is such a cool nickname, but he probably gets that a lot. There's so many things you can do, like dearth, death. I didn't think about dirt. When it comes to estate planning, let's start with this. What do you think most people, like they just don't see it? What do you think most people miss, like right out of the gate? Or what do you think is like the most important thing that people don't see, the blind spot?
And this is an easy one because I don't think it's a legal answer. I don't think you need a lawyer to do it. I think most of what people miss is the organization of information. And I've been married 22 years. My wife hasn't gotten smart enough to leave me yet. I hope that never changes.
Okay.
I don't know how to log into my bank account and pay a bill online. I've never had to do that. Similarly, I go do investments and things with clients or friends that not that she doesn't know about, I'll tell her about them all the time. But she doesn't care. We have a deep trust in each other, and like division of labor and allocation of resources leads to those information gaps. And so if something happens to one of us, there is a gap that needs to be filled between the two of us. And if something happened to both of us, there is a huge gap between who's supposed to come in behind us and clean that up.
Okay.
20 years ago when I started practicing law, it was we could go stand by the mailbox and get mail for 6 weeks. And once we've been there a full mail cycle, we have copies of everything. Well, it's not really the way things work anymore. And so, the foundation of a good plan is having access to that information and a plan in place to organize and consolidate that. And most people it doesn't compute that you think you have to be more, or you think it's, you have a lawyer and have all these different things. Like, no, first step is just having good, clean access to information will eliminate probably 70% of the heartache and headache of doing an estate.
And when you say access to information, you just mean like your own personal information, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Correct. I mean, I think it's where financial advisors serve an invaluable role as tip of the spear with their, data aggregation, balance sheets or whatever,
right,
and getting all that information in there.
Yeah.
That's, step one is having that information. Step two, I love password managers for that reason. My wife and I share a password manager. Not because I'm worried about one of us dying, but it is really convenient to have the kids' frequent flyer numbers and social security numbers in a place where I don't have to call her and hope she's able to go upstairs and look in the safe for them.
Right.
And so, creating that, kind of block and tackle planning systems and processes eliminates so much heartache and headache in dealing with estates. It also allows thoughtful planning on top of that as the jumping off point for that, as we design our wills, powers of attorney, trusts, whether we consider them or not.
Okay. So since you said it, even though we're not promoting, any particular type of like password aggregator, which I use Password Keeper, which one do you use?
I use 1Password. I've never played with another. I just love that one. My IT guy turned me onto it, but I think a lot of them achieve the same goals.
Yeah. So having the information, right, knowing where everything is, and then so you just mentioned, like on the front end, just a couple of key basic documents, like the last will and testament, the power of attorney, the advanced healthcare directive. I mean, right, wrong, or indifferent. If anyone's saying like, hey, like what do I need? I'm like, you at least need the Blessed Trinity, probably, and that's what I call it. Like the Holy Grail of estate documents. And then like you start to get a lot of questions from there. Well, like, do I need a trust? Do I not need a trust? So would you agree, like a good starting spot is, hey, like let's at least get the will, the power of attorney, and the advanced healthcare directive, or what would you say to that as a baseline?
I mean, the contrarian in me wants to say, no, you're wrong, but you're 100% right.
No, please tell me I'm wrong. That's what lawyers do.
You have to have a durable power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, advanced directive for healthcare, whatever it's state specifically called.
Right.
I think you almost probably should have a will unless you have a really articulate reason why you don't need one.
Okay.
If you and I are married and everything's titled jointly, the first person probably passing doesn't need a will because everything's going to pass by operation of law with the beneficiary designations or the survivorship designations.
Okay.
That being said, we don't know which one of us is going to pass, so you would need a will to cover the second person passing in that example.
And so when you're talking to someone, right, and again, you tell me how you operate. Do you provide those basic documents, or do you tend to say like, hey, that's lower? Like I work on more complicated things. Like I like to get into the trust, or do you also do those as well?
No, so I think our office does all of those documents. I think typically I get dragged in on clients that have probably higher needs above and beyond that as well. But we'll do occasional, like I will get into basic estate planning as well.
Okay. When is the appropriate time to use a trust and not?
Well, my favorite question for them is, why do you think you need a trust?
Okay.
I mean, so very similar vein. And maybe the best way to answer your question is to say, why could you need one? Well, avoiding probate. That could be a good reason. Different states have different probate processes that have different complexities, time, and rules. It could be privacy, keeping your name out of public records and all of that. It could be that trusts are harder to challenge than wills, and a blended family wants to, minimize the chance of part of that blend doing it.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Could be, not really revocable trust, but more irrevocable trust. Could be more asset protective. Could be tax motivated for estate and gift tax purposes. The answer is not all time and place, yes or no, you don't. The answer is like, it may make sense depending on what we're trying to achieve. And even once the answer is yes, a trust, then it becomes the complex question of, well, what kind of trust is that? Is it revocable, irrevocable, completed, not completed, grantor, non-grantor, and all the different technical things that we lawyers have to know to make sure that it's, fits the bill of what we're trying to do.
Well, in terms of the states where you're licensed, you mentioned Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, and North Carolina. This could just be a myth, but is like probate better in some of those states? Is it easier? Is it harder? Like of those states, like which one would be a more difficult probate state versus less difficult?
What's interesting, and this is personal perspective. I think Florida historically has the reputation of being the hardest.
Okay.
Although Florida, North Carolina, and Tennessee, I would tell you the revocable trust is probably the common estate planning vehicle. Georgia, for my money, Georgia has one of the easier probate processes in the nation I've ever seen.
Okay.
I'm softening on that a little bit. We've seen during COVID and recently some of the bigger counties in Georgia, and not that it's hard, not that it's expensive, but just that it's slow. We recently had one in a larger county that I won't name in Georgia that, rather than being open in 2 to 4 weeks like it normally is, took probably 4 to 5 months. No need for that. But, the bigger counties have had some, challenges in this kind of, post-COVID world that didn't pop up, where some of those big counties in Georgia, I am starting to recommend revocable trust for that, where my traditional approach has been Georgia, you don't need a revocable trust. The idea of retitling assets is more difficult than doing the probate process.
Okay. But now you're starting to flip on that?
A little bit.
Let's say flip on that, like you're just changing your...
Getting soft in my old age.
Okay. I haven't personally experienced probate in Georgia yet. I think from a tax perspective, Georgia's a pretty friendly place when it comes to retirees with the tax exclusions, especially when you get north of 65, right, on retirement income. I just wasn't sure about the probate piece, but since we're talking about multiple states, I'd love your input, understanding that you're not giving legal advice. As far as like portability, like if I live in Georgia today and I have a house in Georgia, I have a cabin in Georgia, but then, I say, hey, I want to sell the primary. I'm all about the coast, right? But instead of going to St. Simons, I want to go to Amelia Island. I'm just going to make it up, or hell, Outer Banks, North Carolina. But I want to keep the cabin in Georgia. but I have my trust, my estate plan, like I have my power of attorney. I did everything right. I followed the Marc Earth plan. I have the Trinity. I've got the trust. I've got it all, but I'm selling my primary. I'm going to buy a place in North Carolina, and now I'm going to make, North Carolina my primary place of residence, maybe, right? Or maybe it's Tennessee, who knows? But it's just not going to be Georgia anymore, but I still have property back here. If I'm going to North Carolina or Florida or Tennessee, are any of these documents portable? Do I have, as soon as I set foot in Tennessee, do I have to redo the power of attorney and, all these things? Is it completely driven by where you're domiciled? Talk to me about that. I don't know the answer.
So my perspective is that all of the documents are portable, but some of them should be updated.
Okay.
And the best example is your powers of attorney. Let's take the Georgia healthcare power of attorney. I bet every hospital in Georgia is very familiar with that form. Mm-hmm. I bet hospitals in North Carolina and Tennessee are not. And so how quickly is somebody going to, how quickly is a North Carolina hospital going to act on a Georgia form? I would imagine not very quickly. I imagine they're more quick on a North Carolina form.
That's interesting. That's a great point.
And so absolutely, if they are executed properly under the formalities of the state where they originated from, they should pose and be acceptable in those other states. But from a time to market of efficiency of use, I would think your local forms are always going to move faster than your foreign forms, out of state forms.
Okay.
Fair answer?
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Good answer?
No, I mean there are no bad answers here. And so if let's just say I do that, right? I moved to North Carolina. I still have the place in Georgia. I have the revocable trust. I never update my will. I pass away in North Carolina. Do I go through probate in North Carolina, or does someone haul my bones back to Georgia and go through probate here? Does it all matter where I'm a resident? How does that?
Well, so it matters where you're a resident at the time of your passing, okay, and where the assets you own are.
Okay.
And so if I have, if I'm a North Carolina resident but have a, Savannah house, mm-hmm, I'm probably going to have North Carolina probate and Chatham County, Georgia probate.
The county of Chatham, the state of Chatham. Sorry, I did some work down in a previous life in Chatham County. Whew, man, that is a fun place. Savannah, Chatham County Public School System. Anyway, all right. But so you said you have the house in Savannah, you have North Carolina, you're a North Carolina resident, but you would have to someone would have to probate your will in both states. Okay. It's kind of a drag.
And that's where planning comes in to solve that problem.
So talk some more about that. How can planning help mitigate?
Well, revocable trusts avoid the probate process. So if we have a properly funded revocable trust, we could avoid probate in North Carolina and Chatham County in that example.
Regardless of where
it was regardless of where
the property is.
Correct.
Okay.
LLCs can avoid probate. And so even if we just have a will, if we have a Georgia LLC that owns our Georgia property, that can avoid the probate process.
Okay.
If you and I are married, to go back to that example, and
sure,
we own that house in Georgia as joint tenants with right of survivorship, the passing of one of us automatically vests title in the successor where probate wouldn't be needed.
Yep.
And so, there are planning techniques to avoid that and mitigate the cost and time and effort of probate. You just need counsel or the right advisors to help you with that.
No, and that's a great point. And probably a little too much detail, but since you said it, and just this is the way my brain works, LLC versus a trust, when does one make sense more than the other? Or is it just completely depends on the situation? When would someone want to use an LLC as a vehicle?
LLCs can have some different asset protective features that a trust may not have.
Okay, so when you're looking more for asset protection, and I got to, because you're very good at this, right? Asset protection, and I've stolen your soundbite, and I use it frequently, especially when it comes to helping people protect their assets. I'm like, you need to call Marc Earth because you want to stay away from creditors and predators. Right.
I do love that term.
I love it. I mean, and I use it more than I should. But I always give you credit.
I probably stole it from somewhere, but thank you.
I don't think I've ever had an original thought in my head. But no, it's a real thing. So an LLC offers more. When you're getting into that realm, it's more about protecting assets, right, than avoiding probate at that point. Or let's say probate avoidance, like probate mitigation. Or no?
I think that's fair.
Okay. The current estate tax exemption, right, which is $13.1 million plus per person. So let's go back to, since you and I we're using the we're married example. Right now, you and I have a combined, if we were married, we would have a combined exemption, assuming we haven't tapped any of it, of over $26 million.
Correct.
Right? And so let's just pretend for a second that our estate is worth $26 million. But at the end of 2025, unless some legislation is passed between now and then, the way the Tax Cut and Jobs Act spells this out is that, hey, this sunsets back. Your $13.1 million and my $13.1 million both sunset back to like $5 million. So if nothing changes between now and then, and our Savannah home and our North Carolina home and all of our assets are all worth $26 million, now it's January 1st, 2026, and no legislation was passed. The estate is exemptions back to $10 million between the two of us. We just lost $16 million of cushion, right? In theory, we both somehow predeceased, crossed the rainbow bridge together. Now our estate is subject to the $16 million is subject to the 40% estate tax. Do you think that's like a super big issue right now? Is that something people should be mindful and aware of? I would love your perspective on that.
Well, and I'll say this. I mean, it's a really interesting time to be in our world. Okay. Like, it very much reckons back to 2012 when it was a $5 million exemption getting ready to sunset to $1 million.
Right.
You know, the themes were we've never been more politically divided, where, you know, the country's broke and, we'll never get, it's an election year. We'll never reach consensus. And then December 17th, 2012, they reached consensus and extended the bill and adjusted it for inflation. So, personally, if I'm a betting man, I think we see the same themes, and I think history repeats itself with the outcome. That being said, it is a really fascinating time that we can't make bets on my personal opinion.
Right.
And so we have to have a plan in place of how we are going to do this and first do no harm, to steal the medical analogy, and how we approach planning. And that needs to be a really, thoughtful conversation that has to start now, because as we get into the, Q3 and Q4 of 2025,
right,
there's not going to be the bandwidth to do complex planning. Guys like me are going to have our doors, jammed with clients and things.
Well, I mean, you're going to be like a CPA before April 15th. I mean, yeah, you're going to have a lot going on.
And so we're having a lot of those conversations now and trying to be strategic and be, straddle the fence and be ready no matter what happens and how, and, come what may, and be ready to act quickly on things. And I think there's strategies to do that.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. You currently live Georgia, right? Milton area. You have a couple kids, a couple boys, you said like high school, middle school, right? 16, 13. Forgot those ages right? Did I get that right?
16 and 13. You got it.
All right, stuck the landing. Where do you think they're going to school? Are they going to be Georgia Bulldogs? Or are they going to be LSU Tigers?
I'd love to keep them close to home, as I'm sure their mama would.
Okay.
I'd be very proud for them to go to Georgia or Georgia Tech.
Okay.
I don't know if that's in the cards, but we will see.
Once your kids are financially independent, which I hope for anyone, that is sooner rather than later, do you think you're going to retire in Georgia? Or if you're going to retire somewhere else, where would it be and why? Georgia
will always be home. I will always have, I would think this is always going to be home base. We're already seeing it now. Just having a 16-year-old driver, I don't know that I've fully appreciated the difference that would make in our lives, where the fact that they can drive to my parents' house to spend the night so Jamie can go on a work trip with me.
Are they still at Lanier, your parents?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I suspect Georgia will always be home, but we'll travel more. I mean, I love Montana. I love the West. We love the Florida Keys, going down there. And so we'll be probably more mobile, but always have a foot on the ground here in Georgia.
Okay. So when you're traveling in the Southeast, is it the Keys mainly? I mean, is that your spot?
I love the North Carolina mountains.
Okay.
I have a lot of fun in Nashville. I love looking for concerts at the Ryman to see what we can go see.
Yeah.
Love the Florida Keys.
Okay. When you're in the Florida Keys, are you staying at like Duck Key, Islamorada, or Key West? Like, where are you staying in the Florida Keys?
Any and all. We kind of we've got in a rhythm of like either spring break or fall break of every year going to the Keys. And so this spring break we stayed in Islamorada. I think the next one we're going to do Key West. We've done Key Largo before, and try the different fishing, different restaurants of the various Keys and see what you can get into.
What's the best place that you've been to in the Keys as far as like food restaurants go?
I mean, favorite restaurant is Pepe's in Key West.
Okay.
The Mahi Mahi Florentine would be the thing that would be the one meal, would be like a death row meal for my wife, I think, that either one of us would say.
Last meal on earth. Give me, what is it called? The Mahi
Mahi Florentine at Pepe's in Key West.
Now, is that on Duval Street? Like, where is that in Key West?
It's over on Caroline Street, like right over by the Schooner Wharf Bar in that area. Okay, it's one of the oldest restaurants in Key West.
Awesome.
The best place we've ever had, like the cook your own fish, was Lazy Days in Islamorada.
Yeah. Yeah, I love me some Lazy Days. Like we took the kids to spring break. We went. This was a couple years ago. We went to Hawks Cay.
Yep.
That's on Duck Key, and Hawks Cay is cool because it has like the marina, like everything there. And we went out on the Gotcha, and we drilled yellowtail and triggerfish, and we took it to Lazy Days. And we have some pretty finicky eaters in our group. But I'm telling you, like the Lazy Days style was like the home run.
Absolutely unbelievable.
With like the coconut crust and like the lemon butter sauce and the capers. Like, holy smokes, dude. I'll take that all day long.
Yeah, I don't know how healthy it is for eating fish by the time they bring it out, but like with that, but absolutely delicious.
Probably not the healthiest way.
Yeah.
Fish. Are you like, so when you fish, because I love fishing, are you offshore? Are you fly fishing for like bonefish? Like what's your stick?
I mean, I like catching fish.
Okay, just catching.
I've come to, being from Ohio, I don't think we did a bunch of fly fishing. It was more lake fishing and things I grew up on.
Yeah.
I've started fly fishing probably the last 4 or 5 years. So love it. But like bone fishing to me is the hardest thing I've ever done.
Okay.
And like at some point, just give me a treble hook and some corn and I'll go catch some trout and things kind of thing. Right. And so, but I love it all. Don't have a preference. Just like to catch fish.
Okay. Well, Marc, man, I appreciate your time today. I mean, thank you so much for answering kind of my off the wall, wacky questions. If people need your help, whether it's estate planning, tax planning, succession planning, whatever it is, what's the best way to find you, your firm? How do people?
Yeah, probably our website, www.dearthlaw.com.
Dearthlaw.com.
DEARTHLAW.com.
Nice. And hit the website. There's a phone number. They can light you up.
Yeah, learn more about what we do and our approach, see the team and everything else, and email us to get scheduled.
And as far as just how, if someone wants to engage with your firm, because I know different firms work different ways, but do you kind of do like an initial due diligence meeting and then kind of figure out how things go, or just like how does that typically work?
So if I were to design the perfect way to go about that, I love to see a balance sheet and existing planning documents clients have. Mm-hmm. Give me a flavor for what you have and what you currently have going on. And that way it's not only a conversation to make sure that we're a good fit personality wise, both as, client, attorney, style and fit, but also it gives us a chance to, kind of show our homework and show that we're prepared for it and say, hey, well, these are the 4 things that I see just from looking at your documents that we should be considering and talking about.
That's a great point.
And so to me, it makes it a much more, much more practical introduction than just showing up and talking and not having any real substance to the conversation.
Awesome. Well, man, look, appreciate it, and I appreciate your time.
Appreciate you having me on. This was fun.
And hopefully, I don't know, maybe one day, who knows, I'll see you out at the Sphere for a dead show.
Let's hope so.
All right, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
This information is provided to you as a resource for informational purposes only and is not to be viewed as specific recommendations. This information is being presented without consideration of the financial circumstances of any specific individual and might not be suitable for everyone. This information is not intended to and should not form a primary basis for any decision that you make. Always consult your own legal, tax, or investment advisor before making any financial planning considerations or decisions. The views and opinions expressed are for educational purposes only as of the date of production and may change without notice at any time based on numerous factors.